Hello, dear Polymer Clay enthusiasts. I'm Michaela from Learn Polymer Clay, and I'm back with more inspiration for your work with polymer clay. In today's tutorial, we are going to play with nail art foils, sticky embossing powder, and black embossing powder, and put everything together into a swan design. There are many ways in which you can apply nail art foils to beautifully decorate polymer clay pieces. You can use Renaissance adhesive, weld bond, super glue, but you don't have much control over the decorated areas. Today's technique will inspire you, I hope, to use nail art foils and have more control in the process of doing so. As always, I hope you like the tutorial and get inspired to create and use up your scrap clay in the process. Let's dive into the tutorial. In this tutorial, I am going to use the scrap clay as a filler, meaning I am going to place the scrap clay between two sheets of black polymer clay. So I started by properly conditioning the scrap clay. I mixed it into a solid color and then I passed it through the largest setting of my pasta machine. And then I used two sheets of black polymer clay that I passed through a thinner setting of my pasta machine. I'm using number 4 of my Atlas pasta machine. And then I used a parchment paper on top of the block of clay and my acrylic roller to roll all the layers together. And then using a swan silhouette that you can download from learnpolymerclay.com, and that is free to use for personal and commercial purposes. I just cut around the silhouette. I used the craft knife to do so, and I'm just cutting an outline of the silhouette. I'm not really working on the details at this point. And in fact, I'm going to use tools to make these details at a later stage. So I'm using the craft knife to cut out a swan design, and I'm going to use the flexible blade in some areas because I want to have neat cuts. And as I'm not going to cover the margins, because I like this ice cream sandwich look of the piece when you look it from the sides, it is very important to have very nice borders, nice cuts. And it is true that when you are using the blade, you will have nicer cuts than when you are using the craft knife. But there are areas where it might be difficult to use the blade, so you'll have to work with both. In case you don't like this sandwiched look of the piece, you have the possibility to bake the piece and then make a border using a thin sheet of black polymer clay, and then you'll have to bake the piece again for 20 minutes. Or you can use black acrylic ink or black ink to color the scrap clay. I like this sandwiched look, so I am not going to hide it. I also encourage you to take the time and smooth off the edges and work on the piece and make sure that the piece looks nice before putting it into the oven, of course. And then I used my etching pearl tool to just push the polymer clay inwards to make a feather-like design. You can use a skewer, a toothpick, a needle tool to do this. It doesn't have to be the etching pearl. And then I'm just using my fingers to pull this polymer clay, let's say, feathers apart. And then I will use a round camper cutter to create that round hollow space in the middle of the piece. And I like having hollow negative spaces in my pieces. And then after smoothing off the edges and making sure that your piece looks as you want it to look, you can put the polymer clay piece into the oven and bake it for 40 minutes at the temperature recommended by the polymer clay manufacturer. And then you are good to go to the next step of the project. So as you can see, I'm taking the time to smooth off the borders and to make sure that the piece looks nice, because I don't want to sand the piece after baking it, if possible, of course. And then I am going to use an ink pen and sticky embossing powder to glue nail art foils in the areas where I applied the sticky embossing powder. So I used the ink pen to draw simple lines, and then I applied sticky embossing powder on top. And I did this on top of a piece of paper because I want to be able to collect the excess powder and put it back into the jar. And then you'll just have to use your heat gun, and the heat will melt the powder, and the areas decorated with the sticky powder will become sticky. And then you'll just have to apply the nail art foils on top of the piece. And for the nail art foils, you have a lot of colors, designs, effects. There are a lot of elements to play with. And then you'll just have to use the foil, press it into the sticky areas, lift it off, press it again until you achieve the desired effect. When I said that you have more control with this technique, I meant that you have the possibility to decorate only certain areas of the piece. So you can use the ink pen and draw a design on the polymer clay piece. You can use the ink pen and doodle on top of the piece. You can use a stamp and an ink pad and make a beautiful pattern. You can try these too. after finishing decorating the piece with the nail art foils, I decided to add a little bit of black embossing powder because I'm working with a black swan idea and I thought this would work well. And again, I'm using the same pen because I want to apply the black embossing powder in some areas, not all over the piece. And then I used my blade and I applied black embossing powder in some areas. And again, I'm working on top of a piece of paper because I want to be able to collect the excess powder and put it back into the jar. Don't forget to tap off the excess powder from the piece before using the heat gun and melting the powders. And again, you'll just have to use the heat gun and melt the powder. And in order to finish the piece, I applied diamond glaze. And it is a little bit difficult to apply diamond glaze or a varnish on a piece that has a lot of negative spaces. So I had to clean the glaze, the diamond glaze that went into those areas. But I like the resin-like effect of the diamond glaze, and this is a product that works well for me. You should test it to see if it works well for you as well. If you are used to working with resin, resin is a very good option, of course. And if you prefer a matte finish for your piece, you can apply a thin layer of Fimo liquid and use your heat gun to cure the liquid polymer clay. So you have plenty of options to finish your piece. I hope that you like this tutorial. I hope that you are inspired to use up your scrap clay. Please press the like button if you like the tutorial. Please share your impressions with me and stay tuned for more inspiration for your work with polymer clay. Thank you.